Hello, everyone. Before we get into our first of 4 employer engagement sessions, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are privileged to be able to live, work, and play on this land as Nova Scotians. Thank you all for sharing your time with me, and welcome to Independent Living Nova Scotia's Employer Engagement Series. So, ILNS is a registered charity supporting persons with disabilities to make informed choices about how they want to live their lives. So, we also fall under Independent Living Canada, and they are our national umbrella organization representing 25 IL centers across Canada. So Independent Living Canada envisions an inclusive and accessible society where people with disabilities are valued equally and participate fully in society. So my name is Caitlin Phillips. I'm going to briefly go over some of our services here at ILNS. So we do provide employment skills training programming, specifically right now for youth with disabilities. So we offer a RISE program, which helps youth between the ages of 18 to 30 years old the skills and experience to successfully integrate into the world of work. We also provide transition planning and community partnership through some of these pre-employment and employment programs. Specifically, each participant, whichever program they are in, they do receive a transition plan. So if they're in a pre-employment program like our community access program, this is so that they can become fully integrated into their communities and reach whatever goals those may be. So whether that's, volunteering, moving on to employment, going back to school, or a combination of those things, they do leave CAP or this program with a community action plan. And then within RISE, there is a more specific transition plan that is going to list what skills they've obtained and worked on, and then also what they might still need to work on and what their goals are for the future. So again, with these transition plans, it helps them take the next steps wherever they will go. And then we also partner with a variety of community organizations, or some of which fall under the Nova Scotia work centers, so that we can connect participants to individual caseworkers that can help them reach further within their transition plan. We also provide sector-based training. So specifically through our Hotel Works program, this program is for those who are interested in gaining experience and working in the hospitality industry, whether that's at a hotel, through their front desk or guest services, through food and beverage as well, or finally through cleaning services. So we also have advocacy and peer support. So we're really big on helping consumers become self-advocates, know how to communicate and how to advocate for themselves. We do different workshops on, self-disclosure. We also offer peer support events and activities. So some long-standing peer support events include our Art of Disability Festival and our Christmas Gala and Dance. Also more recently, we have started offering food support through our Fresh Eats programming as well. And then I also just want to briefly touch on our research and community development. So Throughout the years, we've been involved in a variety of research projects, to solve issues and create a better community for everyone. Specifically, a couple of years ago, we were involved in a business case to develop the research for a 24-hour model. So individuals with significant physical disabilities could be successful and live within community. And now that has transitioned into a pilot project, which is really exciting. So we had 4 individuals, 3 of which were living in long-term care, moved back into community in the fall of 2022. So we do conduct research and really strive for community development as well. So today's session is about dispelling myths about disability. We are going to go over some terminology as well as some disability statistics. And then finally, we are also going to go over myths versus the facts surrounding disability. And then in upcoming videos, we're going to talk about the following topics: accessible planning and business, accessible recruiting and hiring, and creating an inclusive environment. So what is the goal of these sessions? There are 2 goals. Specifically, we want to advocate for and discuss ways to support persons with disabilities to find lasting and meaningful employment, and to also educate and support employers in adapting to changing workplace cultures and accommodating diversity. So what is disability? We're going to explore this in the following slides. So disability is a social or functional limitation that restricts the ability to perform daily activities. It is also the social experience of exclusion based on an impairment. An impairment is a physiological, psychological, or anatomical loss, abnormality, or situation, and it may or may not cause a functional limitation. A functional limitation is a restriction of sensory, mental, or physical disabilities. PWD is a person with a disability. Accommodation is removing barriers. And then barriers is anything that might be in the way to prevent someone's full participation in life. All right, so impairment and disability. What's the difference? So we're about to watch a short video where Miroslava Tatarin explains the distinction. A little bit more about Miroslava. She is a disability rights program officer for Wellspring Philanthropic Funds and AIDS-Free World's advisor on disability and AIDS. She has a master's in science in public health in developing countries from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She studied international development and spent a year working for the Resource Center for Persons with Disabilities in Tamale, Ghana, West Africa. All right, so let's check out this video.
What is the difference between disability and impairment?
Well, impairment is a physical situation that somebody has. So, for example, if somebody can't walk well, they have a mobility impairment. And if somebody is deaf, then they have a hearing impairment. But disability is the social experience of exclusion because of the social or environmental barriers that exist that then disable somebody. Because if you live in a town with no stairs and your physical impairment makes it difficult for you to climb stairs, but yet you live in a place with no stairs, then you won't be disabled in any way. So that's the difference.
So persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which, in interaction with various barriers, may hinder their full and effective participation on an equal basis with others. And this quote comes from the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So it is important to make the distinction that disability is talking about the social experience of exclusion from society based on an impairment. So, for instance, Miroslava uses the example of a person who has a mobility impairment and has difficulty climbing stairs. In this case, if they lived in a town with no stairs, they would have no exclusion and therefore are not disabled in any way. They are able to participate fully in their community, and this framework for looking at disability is very important to consider. So, evolution of the concept of disability, from medical to social. So, the concept of disability has evolved over the past 3 decades, moving from a medical model to a social one. Initially, concepts focused more on physical and sensory impairments, as well as the health conditions of an individual. The social model of disability has evolved to include cognitive and mental health related impairments and any barriers which may prevent or limit one's full participation in society. And this also includes stigma. Barriers posed by the environment also need to be addressed in order to give everyone an equal chance of participating more fully in society. So these concepts are based on the UNCRPD, or the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Just to summarize, the ideas and concepts of disability are changing, and that is why it is important that we all participate in discussions and videos like the one we are having here today. So we're going to go over some recent benchmarks and milestones. So in 2012, Statistics Canada reported 3.8 million Canadians as having a disability in the Canadian Survey on Disability. In 2013, Canada committed to introduce a new generation of labor market agreements for persons with disabilities, and this was called the Economic Action Plan. In 2014, then there was a Canada-Nova Scotia labor market agreement for persons with disabilities. So again, the agreement is an opportunity to maintain and strengthen Nova Scotia's labor market programs and services for persons with disabilities by continuing to support provincial labor markets programs and services. So then on April 27th, Nova Scotia was the third province to pass accessibility legislation with Bill 59, the Accessibility Act. Jerry Post was named Executive Director of Accessibility, and the Accessibility Act was introduced in 2016, but was redrafted in 2017 as there needed to be some changes. So for instance, the 2030 deadline was created. In 2018, Statistics Canada reported that 6.2 million, or 1 in 5 Canadians, as having a disability in another Canadian Survey on Disability that occurred within 2017. Looking towards the future, 2030 is Nova Scotia's end goal to becoming accessible, and we all have a part to play. So there are 6 principal areas that are being focused on, which include the built environment, education, employment, goods and services, information and communication, and transportation. We do have a chart or a comparison between the 2012 and 2017 Canadian Survey on Disability. There are some differences within both surveys. The green portion of each chart, so step 1 within the census is persons likely to have a disability. So in the 2012 survey, 21.4% are likely to have a disability, and then in the 2017 survey, 35.3% are likely to have a disability. And then the bottom yellow portions of each chart illustrate persons with a disability. So in 2012, there were 13.7, and in 2017, there were 22.3%. So why is there a difference? In the 2012 survey, questions were not as inclusive of persons with cognitive and mental health related disabilities. So mental health related disabilities alone account for 7.2% of all persons with disabilities and 7.8% for youth ages 15 to 24. Other differences can be changes in social perceptions and self-identity. Also, it's probably even higher now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, disability is still very underreported due to stigma and lack of education, especially around mental health. Go through some mental health statistics. Over 2 million Canadians reported a mental health related disability, so 7.2% in 2017. Mental health issues and disorders are more prevalent in women. So, for example, 8.9% of women have mental health issues and disorders versus 5.5% for men. So, is this underreported, and why might this be? So some more mental health statistics. 3 out of 5 youth with disabilities have a mental health related disability. They represent 60% of over 500,000, so 546,000 Canadian youth with disabilities. Mental health issues are higher for younger women, 11%, than young men, which is 5%. COVID-19 has also increased mental health issues for everyone, and the data has yet to reflect this. It's also important to understand that mental health is either considered their disability or is co-occurring with another condition. All right, so next we're gonna just go over some Canadian survey on disability facts. Seniors are almost twice as likely to have a disability as those of working age. All disabilities are more prevalent among women. Over 2/3 of persons with disabilities have at least 2 or more disability types. As we all age, we do need to think about what that statistic really means. So anyone can become a person with a disability at any time due to genetics, disease, or accident. Now we're going to specifically talk a little bit more about disability in Nova Scotia. So 30% of Nova Scotians 15 years old and older have at least one disability, whereas the Canadian average is 22.3%. And this represents 229,430 people in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotians with at least one disability, 32.4% of females have at least one disability, whereas 28.1% of males have at least one disability. So, in terms of the top 4 most common disability types, there's 19.8% that are pain-related, 14.2% have to do with flexibility, 13.3% mobility, 11.8% are mental health related. The other disability types, 6.7% have to do with dexterity, 6.6% are hearing related, 6.5% seeing, 5.3% memory, 5.2% learning, and 1.3% developmental. So when you look at the labor force and disability status among those aged 24 to 64 within Nova Scotia, in this chart on the upper right-hand side, so the dark blue represent persons with disabilities, and then the light blue are persons without disabilities. Within the labor force, so those looking for work or employed, there's 62.2% are persons with disabilities compared to an 84.5% for those who do not have a disability or disabilities. And then the second chart is for those who are employed. So there's, again, a difference between persons with disabilities versus those with who do not have disabilities. So 55.4% of persons with disabilities are employed, and 78.8% are employed who do not have a disability or disabilities. And then the final breakdown on this slide shows the level of disability or the percentage of disability in different age groups. So youth ages 15 to 24, 21% have disabilities. Working age adults who are between 25 and 64 represent 29%. And then older adults who are 65 or older represent 43%. ILNS has the highest rates of disability in Canada. All the numbers are higher. Mental health is over 4% higher than the national average. So what can we as Nova Scotians do to support the members of our community with their mental health? All right, so intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. Examples of these aspects are gender, caste, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, and height. Kimberly Crenshaw, a law professor at Columbia and UCLA, coined the term intersectionality to describe the way people's social identities can overlap. So in order to advance, we all must commit to learning more about issues of ableism, racial equity, gender equity, and intersectionality. And we are going to discuss intersectionality more in future sessions, but it is important to recognize how each person's individual experiences contribute to their thoughts, feelings, value systems, and behaviors. For example, a Black man who just moved here from another country and identifies as having a mental illness and is also gay. He will have a different experience than a white woman born in Canada who has a physical disability and identifies as straight. Both are persons with disabilities, but their situations and experiences are very different. It is important to remember that we are all having unique experiences and are individuals. No one wants to be put into a box, especially one that limits their potential. So again, the most common disability types include pain, flexibility, mobility, and mental health. So the Canadian population ages 15 years and over with a disability by disability type and age group. So it does go over the disability type and percentage for, those 15 years old and older. Given the lower rate of employment for persons with disabilities that we have talked about, it is useful to provide an indication of the total size of the potential labor force with disabilities under the best case scenario, which is an inclusive labor market without discrimination, with full accessibility and accommodation. Work potential is a way to examine how the labor market might change under these more inclusive conditions by describing non-working individuals who might be likely to enter paid employment under this best case scenario. It is not an attempt to measure one's internal capacity, ability to work, or even likelihood of finding employment under current conditions. Improving our understanding of the population of potential workers could aid in better targeting for labor market programs. So now we're going to move into some myths and dispelling them. So myth number 1, persons with disabilities can't be employed. A few facts here. A contributing factor to PWDs not working is exclusion and stigma. Nearly 645,000 PWDs have potential for employment in an inclusive labor market. And then finally, 77% of people have mild disabilities, and 70% with more severe disabilities work full time. So myth number 2, considerable experience is necessary to accommodate workers with disabilities. So most accommodations are simple and inexpensive. Less than 4% require building modifications, and the government and other funding can cover some or all of the cost. So we are going to discuss accommodation options further in our next video, Accessible Planning in Business. However, changes in job duties and modified hours are some examples of simple and inexpensive accommodations. So in reality, and with proper planning and knowledge, most job accommodations are simple and inexpensive. But we are going to go over a list right now about the most common workplace accommodations. So modified work hours, days, or reduced hours cost nothing and can be as easy as offering part-time to 2 people instead of 1 full-time person. Number 2, modified or different duties. Number 3, special chair or back support. And number 4, modified or ergonomic workstation. Could also include a standing desk, etc. So with number 3 and number 4, there is some cost associated, but this can be subsidized or covered by the government. Number 5, working from home some or all of the time. We saw during the COVID-19 pandemic how much this was possible, even just at certain times of the year. So for instance, we actually have a consumer who works for the government. They do use a wheelchair, and the majority of the time they work from home. So their workplace was able to provide that accommodation. Especially that makes it easier, like during the winter time with like all the snow and all of the different types of weather that we get. Creating that accommodation and ensuring that someone could work from home in those situations is a really easy accommodation to be made. Number 6, computer, tablet, or phone with special software. So this could potentially be speech to text, reading out loud, larger print, or other things. So most computers and phones have this built in with some setting changes and again require no cost. Number 7, human support. So this can be a personal support worker or simply an assistant or team member collaboration. So costs are covered by the government depending on the needs. Number 8, adapted or accessible parking. So regardless, there should be accessible parking spaces at all locations. This usually costs nothing, or again, a business can access funding from the government or the Rick Hansen Foundation. Number 9, technical aids. So there are different technologies. For instance, we have a consumer who is nonverbal, so they've used a word board to communicate. They also have a program that uses text and then speaks aloud that they can use as well. So these are just some examples of technical aids. Number 10, accessible elevators. So this is often the most expensive adaptation, but really it is necessary, and the government's target of 2030 includes these retrofits for older buildings. I've also heard of other organizations moving things around so that the person has everything they need on the main floor and only modifying one floor. So this is a good option while elevator construction is ongoing as well and costs very little. So 11, handrails, ramps, widened doorways, and hallways. So again, one of the higher costs, but funding is available. So number 12, communication aids. So this can include ASL interpreters. Someone who needs this all the time will have these assets in place and likely have funding attached to them for it. What's also very cool that happened during COVID was some interpreter services were using tablets that the person with a disability would place on the table facing the person they wish to speak with, and the interpreter can assist virtually. Number 13, adapted washrooms. There is a cost associated with this, but again can be funded. And then 14, specialized transportation. So I have never met anyone who requires this from their employer, which is likely why it is so low on the list. So here in Halifax, we have Accessibus, and most other cities have these or similar services. That being said, in rural areas, this can be a challenge in accessing transportation, accessible transportation. So the person may require a cab on occasion. The other thing, to consider with this in terms of specialized transportation or the limit of that is perhaps, again, being able to work from home, depending on what is required from the employee. Myth number 3, I can't fire or discipline an employee with a disability. There are no special procedures for hiring or disciplining employees with disabilities. It's important to establish clear expectations from the start and to follow the usual company guidelines. If a performance problem does occur, again, follow the company's guidelines, discuss the problem with the worker, look for solutions, and document the situation, and if necessary, terminate the employment agreement. So this area will be discussed in further detail in another video, so the one on accessible recruiting and hiring. Myth number 4, it's difficult to interview individuals with disabilities because of the fear of violating human rights laws. The key is to focus on abilities, not disabilities. So always assume ability, focus on their strengths as you would with any potential employee. And asking clarifying interview questions can be helpful. Again, ask the same job-related questions as other applicants. And then finally, ask if any accommodation is needed. Once you've hired someone with a disability, there's also a good chance they will stay. So for instance, Pizza Hut finds that workers with disabilities are 5 times more likely to stay than people without disabilities. At the end of the day, all employees want to feel that their employer listens to them and their needs. So just ask. Persons with disabilities are usually pretty good about knowing what they need. If they feel like they can't talk to you, then they won't bring things up, and this will lead to more issues later on. Better to be upfront and try to accommodate them from the beginning. This will lead to a higher work satisfaction, better relationships with employees, and a more inclusive workplace overall. Myth number 5, individuals with disabilities are more sensitive than other people. So fact, individuals with disabilities are just like any other person you employ. And then another fact is that PWDs are individuals with individual needs. So we can't be afraid to educate ourselves and have these conversations. PWDs are not any more easily offended than persons without disabilities. Just ask in a respectful tone if you have a question and give them the option to decline if they don't want to answer. Use person-centered language. Ask them about themselves, not all persons with disabilities, because that's not what they are. They can only speak to their own experiences, as we all can. Myth number 6. Individuals with disabilities can't do the job as well. So, 2 facts here. Individuals with disabilities are just like any other person you employ. They have their own unique skill sets and interests. And then some disabilities make the job easier and can enhance certain skills. So, for instance, some people with autism are really good at math, coding, etc. Some people have increased attention to detail due to their disability. And someone who is blind may have a better sense of hearing or smell and may be better suited for jobs with those unique skills. Of course, this is not true for all people. They are individuals, but we can't write anyone off. Again, we are looking at the individual person and their individual skill set and whether it is a good match for the work as we would with any other employee. Now we are going to watch another short video about a company who has had success with hiring all or mostly people with disabilities. So Walgreens executive Randy Lewis was inspired by his son to change the company's hiring practices, and it's already changing people's lives for the better. So over 1,000 PWDs were hired. Sadly, it takes having a PWD in our lives to make these changes and become advocates. So with 30% of Nova Scotians having a disability, don't we all know someone? Or maybe we are someone. So let's watch this video.
I feel like just shooting to the stars, having a job.
Maybe we can demonstrate to the world that people with disabilities can perform as well or better.
I have autism, learning disability, and hearing loss. I have a mixture of all 3, which is pretty hard, but a good battle for life.
We'll get some fresh air, Jules. Julie has a genetic disorder. The hospital doctors told me if she survived, she'd be a vegetable. She's been through so much and still managed to be successful. What is that?
My congratulations. Back in my school years were really bad because I had been bullied. I didn't even know what they didn't like about me that made them walk away.
Julie having a job is a dream that we all never thought would come true.
People with disabilities die a death of 1,000 cuts when it comes to getting a job. And maybe we can do more. I was Walgreens Chief Supply Chain Officer for 16 years. And my son, Austin, has autism.
You're making me remember.
Well, you remember things well. Sometimes we don't. Austin didn't talk till he was 10. But today he drives and works. I underestimated Austin over and over and over, and he surprised me again and again and again. I came to the conclusion there was a whole group of people out there probably that could do the job as well or better that we were unjustly leaving behind. What we did was hire 1,000 people with disabilities, 10% of our entire workforce in the logistics workforce, earning the same pay, doing the same jobs, side by side. The first building turned out to be the most productive in the history of our company. People with disabilities work safer, retention is better, absenteeism is less. As simple as that.
I work at the Walgreens Distribution Center, and I do SPS picking. They even have a nickname for me. They call me Speedy. I can pick so fast that the machine can sometimes end up breaking. When I first started, I was very nervous because I didn't know if I was entering the past again. I felt like the minute I entered the doors of walking the path, oh,
There's a difference between having an existence and having a life. Julie just wants to fit in with everybody else.
when I first walked into my job, I didn't realize love was coming next to.
No, I put that over there on purpose. Austin has few pleasures. One of his seasonal pleasures is taking cattails that come in the fall, and he likes to pull them apart and watch the seeds float around. I was forced to look past the autism to see Austin. I think we have demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that people with disabilities can do the job. Try it. If it doesn't work, what would you really lose? It'll take a lot more people doing this. But if we can move the world that millionth of an inch, it makes it all worthwhile.
They just like you for who you are. And it's been a big change in my life.
Alright, so that's a great video capturing all that persons with disabilities can do in the workforce and just in everyday life. On this next slide, we have, many people might have seen this already, we have two images. The one on the left-hand side shows three individuals, all different heights, all standing on one box because they're trying to look over a fence and watch a baseball game. Now, unfortunately, because of being equal, the shortest individual cannot actually see the baseball game. The individual in the middle can kind of see the baseball game, and then the tallest individual can definitely, they can definitely see the baseball game. But on the right-hand side, the image, again, very similar image. However, it shows a fair comparison, whereas the tallest individual isn't standing on any boxes. The second individual is standing again on one box so that they can see over the fence, and then the third individual, the shortest one, is standing on two boxes so that they can see over the fence and watch the game. So what is equal is not always what is fair for persons with disabilities. Supports or accommodations to those with barriers can help with equality and dissolving ableism in our society. So it's important to remember, again, disability is a social experience of exclusion. Here's another two images. So the top one shows, again, equality or equal, meaning there are four individuals and they all have the same bike. The individual in the wheelchair can't use the bike at all. There's a very tall individual that looks like they're squeezing onto the bike. There's another individual that the bike works for them. It's the right size. And then there's another individual who is, smaller, and the bike is too big for them. So with equity, each person within this image has the appropriate bike for them. So there's an adaptive one for the person who uses a wheelchair so that they pedal with their hands. There's a bigger bike for the taller individual. The individual who had the right size bike continues to use that size for them. And then the smallest individual has a smaller bike. So we have to think equity in terms of, accommodation and creating inclusivity. Thank you all for watching this video. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions by reaching out to Independent Living Nova Scotia. Our number is 902-453-0004, or you can email us at ILNS admin at ilns.ca. Thank you so much, and we hope you watch our other videos as well.